Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to join us for our webinar. So I welcome our participants, attendees. Good morning if you are in Europe, good evening if you are sitting in Asia, and if you are coming from the US. Thank you very much, you guys are very brave. That's an early morning or late night. We're going to talk about creating, predicting, and amplifying video content that will boost your ROI. And during this webinar, I will share the stage with Jon from Unruly, and he will introduce a bit more about what Unruly does in a moment. And we have about an hour together, and during this hour we left ample time for questions towards the end. So we're probably going to present and talk a bit about, how to make content work for your brand and deliver some ROI for about half an hour or so, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions that you can ask, so you can wait for the end of the presentation and during question time. If you have really an urgent question, just pop it, write it into the little question box, the chat box on the webinar interface. But we'll have record it, but we will still address it at the end of the session. So I'd like to open the session with some what I found pretty striking figures. These are just basically some stats about the number of videos which are watched on YouTube every month. That's 4 billion videos which are watched every month on YouTube. On Twitter, there are about 700 videos which are shared every minute. So Twitter is, a big part of fueling YouTube's popularity in terms of sharing and discovering new content. 700 videos are shared every minute on Twitter. And Vine, some of you may have heard of this app. It's basically allows you to create, share, and view 6 seconds video. So that's a very new and very popular format, which is very, very short. You basically tell your story, create videos which are 6 seconds long and extremely popular. It's actually the most downloaded app on iTunes. And it's very popular because 6 seconds, it's a very bite-sized format that's actually great to consume on mobile platforms. So with these staggering figures, it's interesting to note that video content, it's getting higher and higher on top of CMO's agendas. Something that was rather exotic, that belonged to the nice to have in the digital budget, but now it's getting more and more mainstream. One of the reasons why it's becoming more mainstream is because of a shift in media consumption. Over the last decade, over the last 10 years, there has been a huge slump in broadcast TV viewership. Some figures state something like 50%. So there's 50% less TV viewership today than there was about 10 years ago. And that is especially true from the youngest, most coveted demographics, which are basically the millennials. And you can really stretch that to Generation X or so. So basically, if you are in your early 20s or in your 30s, etc., you watch less and less TV, if not at all. At least not TV, the broadcast type, where you basically wait for the program and watch basically what's being broadcasted. This is an audience that has completely changed the way they consume and watch content. It's video, it's mostly watched on a mobile device, on tablets, on smartphones, and so on. What's interesting is not only about changing media consumption habits in terms of, we talk about place shifting, format shifting, type shifting, and so on. But it's, to me, the fundamental shift is these people, these generations, basically, used to be passive consumers of media. So TV, video is something that you watch passively. But this generation, these millennials, are more and more interested in taking an active role in either creating, uploading, or participating, in some form around video content. And that's really basically the most striking difference. So this we call that generation C, C for being creative. So it's defined in terms of age group. People say it's mostly millennials, but it's important to remember that it's not necessarily an age group, but it's more like a mindset. It's a generation of people who want to participate more with media as opposed to just consuming media passively. And that applies, of course, to their favorite medium of choice, which is video content. So that's something, this new way of consuming video content, this new generation, this desire to participate, to create, it's something that marketers finally started to notice. Last year, 2012, was a big year for online video, with spending rising by almost 30%. And the perception of online video content is changing a lot. It's getting more and more positive. Again, as I mentioned a few years ago, it was a nice to have, let's maybe invest into, let's create a viral video. It was really like an afterthought, while marketers now, looking at the changing demographics, media consumption, the importance, the staggering figures that we mentioned, they put video content on a more strategic footing and starting to put in place video content producing editorial plans for their brand, which was not the case before. 64% of advertisers rank online video as effective as TV ads, which is actually a huge number. Jon will talk in a moment about what Unruly does, but they conduct some surveys. One of them is the social ad effectiveness study. And what they found is that not only online video is as effective as TV ads, but it's even more effective, especially when it is being shared and recommended. So very often, this video content online, it's something that you notice or that has been recommended to you by a friend. You will see that on Twitter, on an account you follow. It will appear on your wall, recommended by one of your friends who have seen it and think it's cool and that you should watch it or not. So there's an added benefit of sharing and recommendation that confers greater value to the video content. And that is something that you don't necessarily have with traditional advertising, either on TV or as a format, traditional ad format, purely online. So let's look at the different components of putting in place an effective online video content strategy. And the first bit, the most important bit, is first of all, you need to produce video content. And we really like to make a distinction. When you talk about video content, we're not talking about taking a TV commercial and just putting it online. We move, I believe, I hope so, from creating TV ads online to creating branded entertainment or branded content. And that's really, when we refer to online video and video content, that's what we have in mind. We're talking about video content which are not necessarily a TV ad format, but it's actually a video which is more content-driven, more story-driven, as opposed to basically just pushing a specific product claim or a specific brand. So when we are looking at producing video content, one avenue which is getting increasingly popular among marketers is to crowdsource it, which is basically to get other consumers to produce this video content as opposed to going through more traditional production channels. So it could be agencies, etc., and so on. So at eYeka, just as a quick way of introduction, we are the largest and the market leader in online crowdsourcing and online co-creation with consumers. So we have a platform on which we organize competitions where we invite our community of which is now over 260,000 very talented, very creative people from really all over the world, over 150 countries. So we invite this community of very creative consumers, creative professionals, and so on, to participate in online competitions, to produce, to crowdsource video branded content, among other things. So in our community, we, as I mentioned, we have about 260,000 creators, so people who are naturally inclined to create content on the web. And what we found basically is when you work with consumers to create content, to crowdsource content for your brand, most of the time it doesn't really work well. You will have issues with, the concepts being on brand, being on brief, or you may have some issues as well with most of the time the quality of the content being produced. That's basically, you will get webcam type of YouTube quality for your brand. This doesn't necessarily make for compelling content. So at eYeka we recognize that, and we actually segment consumers into 3 tiers. That's a segmentation that's actually used by Forrester. It's the 1-9-90 rule. There are many different types of segmentations. You can add sub-tiers, etc., and so on. But basically, the proportions remain. Most consumers, the overwhelming majority, 90% of consumers are just not creative. They don't have creative thinking capability. They don't necessarily have a creative talent. And we call these people spectators. So they are, for example, on your Facebook page, the people that will consume, that will read whatever you produce. They may get engaged by giving you a thumb up or thumb down, but that's as far as it goes, basically. Ironically, what's interesting is that most of the crowdsourcing, co-creation exercise that involve consumers takes place within the 90%, where as a marketer, as an agency, you just look for a representative sample of your consumers that fits the target audience of your brand, your product, and then you invite them and just assume that they are consumers and they're all creative, which is not the case. So 90% of consumers are not very creative, and you won't get creative content with them. Above that are people that we term enthusiasts. So enthusiasts are people who have maybe a passion, they are more knowledgeable about a specific brand or category. They are the guys on your Facebook page that will leave comments. So they engage, they talk, they participate, they are more vocal, they have opinions. But really, the top of the pyramid are the people you want to engage with. That's the 1% of content creators on the internet, and they are people with really above average lateral thinking, creative thinking capabilities. They have creative talents, they think creatively, and they can, they are artistically gifted, and they can also produce amazing content that will resonate with the rest of the pyramid, really. So at eYeka, we tend to attract these 1% of content creators. These are the people we have on our platform to produce content using crowdsourcing competition for brands. So when we look at crowdsourcing content, some of you may already be familiar with crowdsourcing. For others, it may be something that you heard of but not necessarily tried. And there are some questions about, okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, I get it. You have to work with consumers which are creative, and I can see the benefit of doing that through competitions, etc. But does it actually work? What's really the return on investment? How do I justify that, figures-wise? So when we look at the return on investment of crowdsourcing, basically there are 3 types of return, and they all complement and feed on each other. The first one is because a crowdsourcing competition, most of the time you will pay a fee to the platform and you will pay prices to the community. People work and compete, and the best entries get rewarded. In total, it's a lot cheaper than to produce content video content through traditional means. So basically, your production budget will be much lower. When your production budget is much lower, and then you actually use the content in a campaign, that means that a lot of your ratios and a lot of your metrics are going to look a lot better. Your cost per view, your cost per acquisitions, and etc. are going to look a lot better because you have a much lower production cost. To bring that to life pretty quickly, that is a project that we've done with Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is communicating globally for their Coca-Cola product. Basically, they have a brand promise, which is energizing refreshment. And that's what they have been communicating on for decades. Coca-Cola is about energizing refreshment. And unsurprisingly, after a while, they kind of run out of ideas on how to say energizing refreshment in an original fashion in many of their markets. So they came to eYeka, they came to our community, and we challenge our community to interpret Coca-Cola as an energizing refreshment in your own style, in a video, animation, or print. So what we were looking here to do is to produce almost a database of assets, very original videos, print, etc., that can be used by Coca-Cola's local markets all over the world, either as they are in online campaigns, on social media, or even on TV, or to inspire Coca-Cola's agencies in different markets and say, hey, that's a different way to communicate, our brand proposition, and that could inspire a campaign, for example. That was really the objective of the project. The project lasted for quite a while. It was on a platform for 3 months. We got over 2,600 entries, which is, really, really high. But what's interesting is the actual results. One of the videos that we received was aired as a TV commercial in some markets in Asia Pacific, and it scored in the top 10% of all-time best ads for the brand, for Coke. We got some winning videos which were shortlisted to represent Coca-Cola at the Cannes Lion last year in 2012. All the video content was used on Coke TV, which is an IPTV, a broadband TV channel that Coca-Cola owns in Latin America, as an always-on content. So they have an online TV channel, which is really about branded entertainment around the Coca-Cola's brand values. And obviously, that's very hungry for content. You need always new things to broadcast. So that's a perfect way to gather content. And overall, the contest generated 6 million online mentions. They had huge adoption of creative materials, 100%, compared to 47% on average. These are all statistics provided by our clients. And most importantly, if they had to produce all of these amount of materials that they need to feed their platform anyway, it would have costed them a lot more money. So by using crowdsourcing, we achieve cost savings efficiencies of 92% compared to traditional means of production. So that's really the first ROI, it's cheaper. The second has to do with the campaign performance. And that is something that we noticed in a lot of our projects, in a lot of our campaigns. Very often, content that is produced by consumers tend to resonate better with other consumers. So, and that's not a universal rule, but that's something that we noticed in a lot of the projects we worked on with agencies and with our clients. So basically that improves your campaign performance. And whatever metrics that you want to use, come view-through rates, click-through rates, likes, engagement, etc. Especially on your bought media, you will have your campaign will perform well. Why is it so? Again, it could be because these consumers come from a different background. They are not professional creative, and we challenge them to tell stories and to create content as opposed to create advertising. So they come from a different world, and they can tell stories which are content and not advertising, and that's what millennials and that Generation C wants to consume online. They don't want to see ads, they want to see content and video content. So to bring that to life very quickly, that's a project we did for Nestlé, Milo in Singapore, and we work with Mindshare, a media agency, and the aim, it was part of an integrated campaign to strengthen the bonds that consumers have with Milo which is a brand of chocolate malt, which is very popular in Southeast Asia. It's been around for 60 years in many markets. So we wanted for an integrated campaign to remind consumers of a bond that they have with a brand. It's a brand that they grew up with when they were young, which is still relevant to their life today. So how do we bring that to life in the form of stories and video content? So that's the competition that we put to our community. Share with us what Milo meant to you back in the days and how it played a part in your life today. We got 38 videos in 4 weeks, and the final 3 winners were selected and really amplified by Mindshare through an integrated campaign. It was on YouTube, on Milo's dedicated channel. It was on Facebook, on MSN. It was, they lifted some screenshots and it was promoted on billboards. It was screened in cinemas as well as on TV. So they really make use of the crowdsourced content and really to front basically the entire campaign. And they also use the content created by a community to inspire the average population, the 90% and the 9% of enthusiasts, and say, why don't you tell us your story about what Milo means to you? And look at these videos as example to inspire you. And that was a campaign which ran on Facebook. It was a very popular campaign. They got 500,000 online videos viewed in less than a month. In a market of 5 million people is actually quite a lot. The campaign was run in Singapore. Click-through rate of 5%, 3 times the industry average. They got 6,500 new Facebook fans. Again, for the market size, it's actually pretty good. Their Mindshare won an award in the client as well for Best ID Social, and market share grew by 1.8%. During the period of the campaign compared to the year before. Accounted obviously for the shift, the time shift between the campaign and the sales effect. So overall, it was a pretty good campaign. Really, that delivered well because we had fantastic content that resonated with consumers. So that's really the campaign performance part. And then finally, what we found as well is because it's consumer-created content, because it's content and not ads, it tends to fare very well on earned media, which is everything on top and above what you pay for in terms of your media budget. So that's basically the videos are more shared, people comment more, etc., etc. It's all the additional impression, viewerships, etc. that you get. And again, that has a huge impact on in terms of ROI for your total campaign KPIs really. So one good example is a campaign that we run for Nokia in the Middle East. It was for the launch of the Nokia N9 in the UAE, Dubai, Qatar, etc. so on. And the aim was to drive consumer engagement online. So there was a proper above-the-line campaign to support the launch. In top of that, we created some really interesting videos taking a content approach, again, not an advertising approach, where the key feature of the phone throughout the communication, the unique selling point of that Nokia N9 at that time was that you can navigate through the different functionalities and apps using a swipe gesture, which was a novelty at the time. So what we did is that we asked our community of creators that show us, do a funny video, an animation where you can turn a situation to your advantage with a real-life swipe. And here the aim was to gather great video, great content, and then we can add an end frame or end shot, which is Nokia branded, and that would lead to a microsite, for example, where you can have demo of the products and so on. So we ran that project on our platform for 5 weeks. We got 43 videos. Obviously, I can't show them online because of the lag time and the delay using online webinars. But if you guys are interested, we're happy to share all these case studies. So what happened is that Nokia and its media agency, Cara, they already had 2 videos that were produced, which are a bit more traditional in terms of format and approach. And we had 3 videos with 3 winners coming from our platform. So we have 3 crowdsourced video and 2 traditionally produced video ads that we call the benchmark videos. And these 5 videos were amplified the same way same campaign on Facebook in the UAE. And the results, again, speak for themselves. The traditional videos, the benchmark video had some decent figures. They got click-through rate of 1.25%. Social click-through rates, which is all the earned media, people sharing and etc., of 1.11%. Okay, in terms of likes, conversion is the number of people who actually will go to a site after that. You can look at the number of video plays, interaction, and so on. Well, I won't go into details too much into the figures, but basically the short of it is that from any metrics that you can look at, especially in terms of social KPIs, in terms of earned media, eYeka's crowdsourced video outperformed the benchmark videos every respect. Plus 108% in video play, plus 50% social click-through rate, highest conversion, higher social click-through rate, etc., and number of likes and so on. So it was a really huge success, and it really delivered to the campaign all these additional share, views, and etc., which obviously were not paid for. So that's really the return on investment in terms of earned media. So that's so crowdsourcing video content with consumers work because again they come with a very fresh perspective. They are not traditional creative, so they can actually think like content and stories as opposed to doing ads. And it delivers in terms of ROI. It saves money on your production budget. Your campaign performs better, and then it performs well on earned media, which also adds to all your KPIs. Right, so I'm going to hand over to Jon from Unruly now, who is going to talk about something which is actually very new and pretty amazing, about amplifying video content. Now you have your video, it's produced through crowdsourcing. Now how do you actually amplify that? But his company, Unruly, has something which is really unique, pretty unique in the world, is that they have devised a way to predict which video will be the most shareable and will go the most social, and they have devised a very scientific way to go about it. So I hand over to Jon now.
Thanks, Joel. Hi guys. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, just to sort of pick up on what Joel was talking about latterly there with the potential for earned media and the benefits that brings. That's really where Unruly sits. It's about maximising the opportunity for that earned media and just basically making your creative work that little bit harder. If we, Joel, I know you're driving, so if we could sort of move on to the next slide, please. And then the one after that. So what we're looking at here is really the foundations of Unruly. I'll just touch on sort of who we are and you know why we have a credibility in the space. Unruly's been in existence since 2006. The first business that was built was the site that you're looking at here. It's only a screen grab of the site, which is the Viral Video Chart. It's a public website, viralvideochart.com. Viralvideochart.com's been around 6 months, less time than YouTube has, so it's 6 months younger than YouTube. And what the Viral Video Chart does is scan for the video content that are uploaded to the main video sharing sites. Now, obviously globally, YouTube is widely regarded as being the kind of the main platform for video online, but you've got other sort of rising stars like Dailymotion, Metacafe, these sorts of other sort of secondary web video sites, which we're pulling all the data in from. So what the Viral Video Chart does is track the videos that are uploaded. It monitors, or it creates a unique code for each of those videos, and then there's web crawlers scanning billions of web pages looking for where those videos are reposted. So I don't know how clearly you can all see it on your screens there, but underneath where it says top 20 videos, you should just be able to make out Facebook and blogs. So what the Viral Video Chart does is look for where these videos appear across those platforms. Twitter as well, although the Twitter API is not quite as robust as it might be. So the data that we get from there is you know, a little bit problematic sometimes. But this screen grab that was taken yesterday, we're looking at Volvo trucks. The significance of this is at the top of the chart there. The significance of this is that of all the content that's online currently, it's actually a piece of branded content that is being shared more than anything else. So as you can see going down the list there, you've got Rihanna, you've got various Vivo videos sort of in the list there, and typically that's people posting their favourite pop stars, their favourite music on their Facebook walls, this sort of thing. So for a brand to be outperforming the best that pop culture has to offer is a really, really good news day for, in this case, for Volvo Trucks. I mean, I don't know if you've all seen the video, but I'd encourage you to go to the Volvo video chart after the conference here and go have a look at it. It's arguably the ad of the year. It's certainly my favourite piece of content of this year so far. So having sort of started off looking at what's happening on the web, we've built a business over the last 6 years about creating this buzz and creating a product set that enables brands to come play in this space and really perform well across the social web. If we move on to the next slide, please, Joel. What we've developed and where we've arrived now is this 360-degree approach to social video. So we're not a social video production company. There's lots of those. There's clearly platforms like eYeka who can help out with delivering sort of best-in-class creative for social video. But what we've created is a product set that monitors what goes on with Unruly Analytics. I'm not going to talk too much about that at the moment, but if it's something that this sort of tracking and monitoring is a particular sort of interest, then we can connect offline and talk about that a little bit more. Leading on from that is Unruly Labs, which is really about making learnings from looking at what's working and applying that into optimizing content to be as contagious as it possibly can be, and contagious in respect that if you go out and buy a bunch of videos, that's one thing, but what you want is the video to take on a life of its own, and for people to be talking about it online, sharing it on their Facebooks, Twitters, and whatever else their sort of social videos of choice. And then the Activate product, the sort of the red area there, is really about engaging that audience, and that's really the backbone of our business. That's kind of how we monetize the kind of cool, exciting insights and analytics and learnings. So I'm going to focus in on Unruly Labs and really around the core of that, which is the prediction or evaluation of how engaging a piece of content is. So, Joel, if we can move on to the pillars slide, please. So ShareRank is really sort of sitting on two sort of areas that help pull the story together. So the Volvo video chart we've talked about there. What the Volvo video chart is a monitoring tool for seeing how video is performing, how many shares it has, how many views it has, and therefore a kind of a share rate, a share to view ratio. Obviously, the more contagious a piece of content, the more shares there are going to be per view, or conversely, fewer views per share delivered. What we've done is map that science over into the Social Video Lab, which is a physical space. Where I'm sat here in London, we have a 2,000 square foot facility in the basement of the building called the Social Video Lab. Is where brands come to kind of absorb and learn around social video and how they can maximise the opportunity. We have spaces in New York, we have spaces in Hamburg, Stockholm, Paris, and we're rolling out to Asia this next year, 2014. But the learnings that we make in the lab is what is it about these videos that's driving this performance, and what elements of these videos are most important to enable and maximise the opportunity for sharing. Moving on to the next slide. Drilling a little bit deeper into the sort of outputs of ShareRank. What a ShareRank report does is really identify how the piece of content that you've produced resonates with your target audience. So this would be your core audience of, I don't know, if you're Milo, then it's going to be, I'm guessing 16 to 24-year-olds, something like that, against the general population, which in the case that Joel went through would be the Singapore, sort of an average Singaporean web user. So it's really about how appropriate your piece of content is to the audience that you want to reach. The second sort of element is how well you as a brand are performing against the competitors that you set, and that could be other brands in the same space, or it could be other peer brands. So if you're Nike, you might be wanting to look at what Red Bull's doing, for example, or something along those lines, and then more broadly into the sector and into the market. So it kind of hits across several points. Moving on to the next slide, please, Joel. Where ShareRank comes from, this isn't us just sort of guessing at some numbers and guessing at some output. We've worked with a number of well-respected and recognised global seats of learning. Ehrenberg Bass is part of the University of South Australia, and their absolute reason for being is marketing science, and really looking into this kind of black box, which is marketing and advertising. Now, at Ehrenberg Bass, there's a department dedicated to kind of contagious content, and that's the sort of team that we work with. But across the board, our relationships with these sort of seats of learning are really in providing data for their studies that they're undertaking. So over time, we've sort of built those relationships on. We've taken the best of what they've been outputting and kind of moved the story on to create a marketable product. Next slide, please, Joel. The main sort of output that's come from all of the studies that have been done into the space is kind of nicely summarised by Dr. Karen Nelson-Field, who's quoted here. Dr. Karen Nelson-Field, just to let you know who she is, I mean, as it says on there, she's one of the lead scholars at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. She's an ex-Diageo marketer who went back into the world of study. She travels the world talking on the subject of contagious content. She's recently launched a book which is well worth a read if you're interested in the space. But the sort of headline is that the more positive, the more intense an emotion to a piece of video, the more likely it is to, more positive the emotion, the more likely it is to get shared than if it's a negative piece of video. There are exceptions to these rules, but just as a general average, then actually what you want to be looking for is something that's uniformly positive. The next slide shows us an element of the ShareRank study. So ShareRank results, a ShareRank study is a control panel based study. So what we have is a panel of 100 viewers within your target audience. So if we use the Milo analogy again, that would be 16 to 24-year-olds in Singapore, and then we have 150 web users for the market. So again, that would be 150 Singaporean web users. They're exposed to the piece of video. We're doing all the eye tracking, so they sit at home, they log into the system, and we're watching them watch the video. So we can see whereabouts they're looking at the video. That data all gets pulled back in. But what it all relates back down to is a questionnaire. So they're giving a bunch of questions around what it was about the video, how it made them feel, the elements within the video they particularly enjoyed, and all of these sorts of things. This is quite closely guarded sort of piece of work that we're doing. So if you're particularly interested in this, then please do reach out, and we can do a more in-depth study. This is very, very top level, because as you'd appreciate, the work that we're doing is commissioned by clients, and so it's client-specific data. But you know, the sort of bits that I'm showing you today are the kind of the shop window, I suppose. But what we've identified working with the scholars that were highlighted on the previous slides is a number of psychological responses. So there's 18 currently that we've identified, and they range from the positive. At the top end, you've got exhilaration and happiness, which are the kind of, you know, the mainstays really of, in inverted commas, viral content. But then you've also got sort of negative connotations like sadness and like disgust, and then working all the way down to the bottom, you've got fear and anger. So what we're looking at here is the reaction to a video that you can't help. As a viewer, you can't help if something makes you feel happy or something makes you feel sad or nostalgic for something else. As marketers, what we can try and do is elicit those responses, but we can't necessarily help how people feel about the video. So at various points, they're asked about how happy it made them feel and how you know, surprised it made them feel, for example, and they're scoring the videos from 1 to 10 at every point. Further compounded on the next slide, please, Joel, are the motivations. So we can make a, we can assess how well a piece of content resonates with the target audience. But that's still just the view. If you want someone to be picking that video up and putting it on their Facebook, for example, which is the most common sort of form of sharing, then it needs to they need to be motivated to do that. There needs to be some reason why they would choose to pass that video on and put it in front of their peer groups and their friends. The most common one is the top one there, which is the shared passion. A great example is something along the lines of I'm into snowboarding, for example. If I see a GoPro video and it's a fantastic sort of snowscape, and someone sort of with a webcam, a helmet cam, shooting down a black run somewhere in the Alps, and I know a bunch of my friends are also into snowboarding, I'm more likely to be sharing that piece of content with them. There's a reason for me to do something beyond just view that piece of content, enjoy it in context, but getting that sort of peer-to-peer advocacy is a lot more powerful. So when the control panels are watching this piece of video, they're being asked a bunch of questions throughout that kind of drives towards how strong a psychological response was created and how strong a social motivation was created. Moving on to the next slide, we see one of the key outputs of the share rank study, and that is a share rank score. Once we've got all the data from these 250 people who watched the video under closed circumstances, we feed all that data through a bespoke algorithm. And algorithms are trained by market. So video consumption tastes here in the UK are going to be very different to the kind of video consumption tastes of the people in I don't know, Brazil, which is another place where we've got a share rank algorithm built for. Indonesia, we're building again. Video consumption tastes there are very, very different. So these algorithms are continually trained. We're constantly giving them new content to look at. But what we're generating on the back of the sort of bespoke test that we're doing for brands is generating a specific score. So just looking to the sort of bottom right of the speedometer here, I suppose, you've got 4 touch points there. This is for a technology brand that was looking at the US market, so this is a US output. So what you can see first on the graph, scoring somewhere around about a 3, is how the sort of US nationally representative audience felt about the video. 3 isn't a particularly strong video. It's not terrible, but it's it's not going to set the world on fire. The good news here for the brand in question is if you look at this sort of darker blue line, scoring just above a 4 there, that's the target audience. That is, they're 18 to 35-year-old affluent males, as it was in this case. Their video resonated better with the audience that they were looking to reach. So that's a good news day for them. That's also compared, as you can see on the chart there, to what the tech sector norm would be. They didn't perform quite as well, but also against the US market norm. So this is a kind of a uniform score for a typical US video and how an audience responds to that. So for this, there's some good news and there's some not so good news for the brand in question here. But the difference between the tech norm and the norm that this brand had on this specific video isn't enough to be concerned about. I mean, it's points of percent. If if the video had scored worse than the US nationally representative audience, then you know that they've done a particularly sort of bad job really at engaging their audience. On the next slide, what we're looking at is another sort of way of viewing this. So on the x-axis along the bottom, you've got your share rank score. On your y-axis is sorry, no, my mistake. Well, you've got the intensity of the psychological response, and on the y-axis, what you've got is the strength of the social motivation, which is a 1 to 5 score. As you can see, where the sweet spot is the top right here. So the video in this case, and it's a different study to the one that we just looked at previously, you can see that the video in question way outperformed the sector norm, the market norm, and how well received the video was for the nationally representative audience. So the video sits squarely in the sweet spot. And actually, this video, if you sort of scan your eyes down to the to the x-axis at the bottom there, it scores over a 7 in terms of the intensity of the psychological response, which is really, you know, that's a really strong score. You know that inherently there's a contagiousness to this piece of video. Moreover, going back over to the y-axis, coming up the left-hand side of the chart there, we're sitting in the sort of upper quartile of the social motivation. So things are lining up here for what would potentially be a pretty successful video in terms of the earned media that would be expected. On the next slide, please, Joel. What we're looking at is the sort of share curve. This is a kind of an average, really. The dark blue line through the middle is the what the algorithm predicts in terms of share rate. So along the bottom you've got your share rank score. So this piece of video scored a 7. If you kind of move your eyes from the cross where it's marked over to the y-axis, what you're getting there is a share rate. So you're getting a share rate somewhere in the region of about 10%. So that would mean for every 100 views that you're generating with your piece of video, you would expect 10 of those views to do something beyond the view. To get 10% of your audience engaging with your piece of content in that way is very, very good. As you can see, it's kind of an accelerating scale. We've never scored a piece of video at 10. It doesn't exist yet. It's not there on the web. You know, that would be the sort of holy grail, so to speak. That would be the best possible case scenario. But what you can do with the share rank score is fine-tune your piece of content. There is an example that I give you recently of a brand that we worked with, and confusion was one of their sort of main piece of feedback from their audience. The viewership didn't really know who the brand was or what was going on. So our feedback to the brand was re-edit the video and put some sort of copy in the lead-in to say who you are and what this story is about. So the predicted share rate that we had off the test of the original piece of content was lower than what was actually delivered at the end of the campaign. I think there was a variation of about 5%. So the actual sort of share rate at the end of the campaign was 5% higher than what was predicted having done the share rate, and that's basically the brand having the opportunity to adapt their content before it's launched. So this is a kind of an audit of the piece of content before it goes. In the context of an eYeka test where you're having multiple pieces of content, what you'd see on a chart like this is a number of X's. If you're Coke and there's 3 pieces of content and one scoring a 5, one scoring a 6, and one scoring a 7. What it's telling you is that that's the piece of video that you want to go with. If there's only one piece of video that you want to champion, what you can do is pre-test before launch and let your audience tell you the piece of content that they enjoyed the most. The dotted lines on the graph that we're looking at here are the sort of bounds of accuracy. So at any given time, there can be multiple things happening online and offline that would govern how successful your campaign is. There's things outside of your control that would impact on the success of your piece of video. What these bounds account for is that. So what we'd expect is the video to be sitting not necessarily directly on that line, but certainly within those dotted lines there. Moving on to the next slide, please, Joel. This is a sort of a timeline of where share rank can be used. Ideation is obviously one point. What we're seeing a lot of brands doing is audits. So we're working with a brand at the moment who've given us 100 pieces of video to test. These pieces of video are pre-existing. They're things that they've put on TV or they've put online, and they want to make learnings from. And the learnings that they'll make is what was it about these videos that worked and what was it about these videos that didn't work. They'll then feed that data into the creative process. So they'll say that the types of video that worked best were funny, or they were moving, or they were sad, highly unlikely, but possible. And then that would govern or make suggestions to the creative teams the kind of content that they should be producing moving forward. So that's really where sort of the ideation stage comes in. Pre-testing, as I mentioned previously, if you've got a number of pieces of content that you want to select from, that's where pre-testing comes in. Likewise, as I mentioned before, if you want to fine-tune a piece of content to really maximize the opportunity of the distribution, then as long as you leave enough time between doing the test and launching so that you've got enough time to re-edit if possible, then that's where it goes. So there's never a bad time really to be running a share rank score. It really depends how how informed you want your distribution strategy to be. And it's not just first generation shares. If we move on to the next slide, please, Joel. What we're looking at here is the sharing funnel. So as you appreciate, people get exposed to the piece of content on blogs that they're visiting, on games that they're playing, on websites that they're sort of going to read news on, or whatever it's going to be. They pick that piece of content up, they put it on their Facebook, or they put it on their Twitter feed. That obviously then gets exposed to a second generation of viewers, their friends and their peer groups and their followers. A proportion of those will also then go on to share the piece of content. So whatever your paid distribution strategy, this first generation of views is really just the sort of tip of the iceberg. What you've got to be looking at is all the generations of views and sharing that goes on after that. So what the share rank prediction is looking at is all of that piece. So it shouldn't be a case of if your paid distribution isn't delivering to the level the share rank predicted. It's not that it's wrong. It's just that you need to be looking at the multiple generations to ultimately get your number. That's really where the viral video chart comes into its own, because that's looking at the web more broadly, and it's looking at all sharing across the social web. But what about finding these audiences? This is where the amplification comes in. On the next slide, what we're looking at is, when it moves over, is the social video ecosystem. Unfortunately, some of the animation here, I think, has fallen away. The big green spots that you can see here, YouTube looming large at the top, you can see that there's a certain degree of coverage there. I mean, the stats that Joel was quoting at the top of the presentation, there's huge amounts of activity happening within YouTube and huge number of views. But it's not the entire video ecosystem. Comscore did some research earlier this year, and they identified that actually video consumption on YouTube makes up about a third of everything that happens online. So to have a very robust video distribution strategy, what you need to make sure is all the touch points are covered off. Likewise, Facebook. If you load it up onto your Facebook channel, that's great, but you're talking to the people that are already fans of the brand and already engaging with the brand. There is advertising opportunities within Facebook, within apps, or within news feeds and this sort of thing, which are great. But again, it's not everywhere you need to be covering off. Down the left-hand side here, what you've got is the various different touch points that make up the ecosystem. You've got the blogosphere, so these are all the niche pockets of the internet where the super fans live and talk and discuss about what it is that they're talking about. You've got content discovery, which is where your sort of casual web browsers are wasting time. That's a bit of a harsh turn of phrase, but they're killing time looking for content to consume and then pass on. You've got mainstream media, which are a lot more traditional sort of titles. The example we've got in the ecosystem here is The Guardian, which is a big UK newspaper. You've got the video sites, and then you've got the social networks. A robust video amplification strategy will cover off all of these that are appropriate. The days of just loading your video up onto YouTube and expecting people to find it and watch it are long gone. You need to make sure that when you're producing a piece of content and you want people to find it and watch it, you need to make sure that all of these areas are are covered off. Joel, I don't know what happens if you hit next, but hopefully it will bring in mobile. No, it doesn't. But mobile is equally important now. People are consuming video in increasing numbers on mobile. There's less of a differentiation between desktops and mobile. So again, the introduction of Vine and short form video content like Instagram have opened up new opportunities for brands to play in the space. So again, the amplification is very, very important to make sure that you're not just thinking of one platform, you're thinking of all the different platforms that make up the social video ecosystem. This final screen here before I hand back to Joel is a screen grab from our social video lab. Unfortunately, the animation again appears to have fallen off this slide. But the kind of the story here is that on the left-hand side of the screen you've got a share rank score. The screen we should be looking at had a score of 3.5, and sort of if you move sort of down below that, you've got a guaranteed view count of 1 million views. Moving over into the central part of the screen here, you've got an earned view count. The sort of variance between a 3.5 and a 7 is several orders of magnitude. If you're buying 1 million views for your 3.5 scoring piece of content, you can expect several hundreds of thousands of earned views. If you invest the same in distribution, so 1 million views into a piece of content that scores 7, what you're looking at is a significant uplift in the number of earned views. So as a business, what we're looking at is not trying to encourage brands and encourage marketers to spend more money on distributing content. What we're helping brands do is helping them make their content work harder and really then have a positive impact on the earned coverage that they'll generate from their campaign and from the investment that they've made.
I mean, just quickly on my side, I want to say a big thank you for all the attendees. You know, thanks for turning up and for listening to us and for asking questions. Before I hand over to Jon as well to say, you know, his final words, don't hesitate to liaise with us if you have questions that you maybe wanted to address more individually or that comes up later and say, oh yeah, how about that? Just contact us. We'll be very happy to reply. We have a lot of case studies. We publish white papers. We actually just released a white paper on video content marketing that we produced with Unruly and a number of co-authors as well, including big brands like Coca-Cola or Energizer, Chic, etc. So it's a white paper which is packed with best practices on producing, amplifying, predicting video content. So I strongly recommend that you read it. If you can't find it, it's on our platform, eYeka.net, on the resources. If not, just liaise with us and we'll send you a copy. Jon?
Yeah, Joel, nothing really more to add. Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. You know, if there's any questions, if you'd like to learn more about the activation in more detail, the amplification of content, then by all means just reach out. You'll find me on on LinkedIn or perhaps on the invite for this as well, actually. Yeah, I'm more than happy to help, and likewise with ShareRank or the analytics product. And just to mirror Joel's point, white papers, there's a number of resources on the Unruly website as well, unrulymedia.com. We publish white papers pretty much on a monthly basis as well, with guys like eYeka and with brands. So yeah, there's multiple resources there.
All right, well, that's all. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll do another webinar soon. So stay tuned, and we're looking forward to follow up with you, get your questions. So get in touch, don't hesitate. Thank you very much.